Let's pivot a bit and speak about how scammers use consistency and reciprocity to lure victims and how we can mitigate them with proper policies and procedures. Let's talk about John. John worked for a company that was a manufacturing company, and he was looking for a part for one of his pieces of equipment, a specific part. He looked for a long time, several months. He couldn't find the part, but he missed the one company that makes the part. And for the sake of anonymity, let's just say that that company is in Wyoming. One day, someone called John. He introduced himself as Mike. He's a well-spoken person. And he said, "John, I'm looking for people who are interested in this component. Would you be interested?" John was elated. This was the exact part that he had been looking for months. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, John and Mike exchanged many emails and many phone calls. Consistency. The communication was consistent. John sent Mike drawings of his equipment, of his factory. Mike gave him suggestions. Reciprocity. John felt indebted to Mike. So at the end of a couple of weeks, when they came to an agreement for what Mike could sell John, John readily accepted the offer, and Mike sent him an invoice for $50,000. The invoice included instructions about how to wire the money to a bank account. Standard procedure. This is a B2B transaction. $50,000, that's pretty standard. So John wired the money, and the next day, John was expecting to get a tracking number for the goods that he had ordered. The tracking number never came. So John sent Mike an email. No response. John called Mike. It went to the voicemail. By the end of the day, John was getting kind of antsy. So he Googled the company, the Wyoming company. He found them on Google. He called the main phone number and he asked to speak to Mike. Mike answered the phone. The voice at first sounded like the Mike he'd been talking to, but as they talked for a few minutes, the cadence of the person's voice was slightly different. The words that the person used were slightly different. And both of them realized that Mike, that John had been talking to, wasn't the real Mike. John was the victim of an impersonation scam. It gets better, though. You see, the scammer had set up a fake corporation in another state, registered it with the state, and the corporation had a name that was very similar to the Wyoming corporation. And then the scammer set up a bank account with that new corporation's name. And that bank account is the one that John wired the $50,000 to. So what happened? After John wired the $50,000, 5 minutes later, the money was transferred overseas, never to be seen again. What can we learn from this? We learn that no matter how much you invest in virus protection, antivirus protection, firewalls, intrusion protection systems, high-end expensive IT, and even training for your employees to make them aware of the dangers of phishing attacks, it's not enough. The reason is that scammers these days can clone voices. They can put text generated by AI, like ChatGPT, through these fake voice simulators, and they can make themselves sound like an employee, a real employee that works for a real company, using the same jargon as that real employee would use in the industry. So how do we mitigate our risk? The way we mitigate our risk is that we have corporate governance policies and procedures that tell us what we do for procurement. How do we vet the companies that we want to do business with? Let me just give you a few examples. One example is we make sure that the company is registered with the state where they claim to be. We make sure that we know their official phone number. We know how many years they've been in business. We look at their ratings on the Better Business Bureau. We look at their LinkedIn profile for their company and for their employees. These are standard things that you would put in a procedure for vetting a supplier. So if someone like Mike calls you, you don't necessarily just tell him no. You say, Mike, let me get some information. This sounds very interesting. Thank you very much. And then you go to the company's website and you call Mike using the phone number that's on the company's website. You do your due diligence. You have corporate policies and procedures to help mitigate the risk of scammers that use consistency in their communication with you, and they also use reciprocity to give you something in hopes that you will give them more back. More meaning your money that you lose and it disappears forever.